ball. But in the video, of course, for this hour is Keirsten Greggs. And if you want to know more about her, you can go to traprecruiter.com or just follow her. She just rather than follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter. How are you, Keirsten?
I am good. Thank you for having me. I see that you are turned up in the evening hours, so I'm going to match your energy.
Well, yeah, for some reason I am. I'm usually this cool collective dude that just comes on and bore
Mhm.
people to death with information. But tonight, for some reason, the baseball cap is the
It's your fitted.
one.
Yeah, it's your
Yeah,
fitted.
yeah, and I tried to find because I'm from New York. I'm from Harlem,
Right,
so
right.
I'm really my loyalty is really to the Yankees. But since I've been in Chicago for such a long time, I
Lifetime.
have to, yeah, I got to represent Chicago in this particular instance. Tell me in the comments where you guys are from and you're listening, and hopefully you'll join us and join in the fun. Now, as you know, we're doing this show about hip hop songs and job advice, and the official title is 10 hip hop songs offering the best job search career advice. If you have some lyrics that might be career oriented, feel free to put those in the chat. Maybe we might be able to pick those out and feature them on the show, and maybe feature your name along with it too, especially if you're on LinkedIn. I'm going to try to share the actual video on LinkedIn because it only pops up when we go live. And so, video is not as efficient as far as the streaming tool on Twitter as it is on LinkedIn. So here I am retweeting it and hopefully, you guys will catch up with what we're doing. So we've gone through a whole bunch of songs and we tried to pick out some of those that have great job search and career advice. Now, I will warn you, we are devoid of some of the more contemporary artists like
Yeah.
Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, and so many others that might have something that might have job advice. But, for me, I'm in my 60s. So, Kumo D is pretty much my contemporary. You guys could probably relate to it as well. And I know a lot of young people who actually only listen to old school hip hop.
Mm.
So we don't have anything against that music. It's just that it was just easy to reference the ones that we were very familiar with. So again, we want you to join in on fun. So feel free
Okay.
to. You can also participate in the after show with comments or any observations you may have. You can keep commenting on the thread. You can also call and text me at 708-365-9822. You can follow Kirsten, who I really want to call Kristen.
No.
Well, Chrissy. I want to call all these other names and Kirsten. Really, can I just call you KG? Is that
Yeah, that's a approved
okay?
nickname. Yeah,
Okay, good. So that's good. It's only because my phonetics get short after 6 o'clock, and I'm just pretty bad.
I understand.
Okay, thank you for being so understanding. So let's go ahead with the show. I went ahead and retweeted it and had Kirsten. And hopefully that you will go ahead and retweet the show if you like it. That's her information on the bottom third. Again, I want to be sure. Now, we can't play these tunes because YouTube will kick us off and LinkedIn will send us nasty messages. So I really want you guys just to really imagine it in your mind. Maybe you can play some of these songs while you on your end as they come up, because probably some of these you haven't heard in a long time. But one of the first ones
Yes.
I automatically thought of was my voicemail from 1992.
Oh
I
my
had,
goodness.
I go to work on my voicemail. Was
Listen.
it not? I think it was 1991 or 92, whatever. I think it was 91 because I got married that year and I decided to get creative without voicemail. So, so I put that on there as, as the thing.
We're keeping it PG, but I had some other thoughts about you being newly married and telling people what y'all were doing when you didn't answer the phone. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, though that came a little bit later with a Maxwell song, but I'll let you use your imagination with that.
Okay,
Anyway.
call number 1.
I go to work by Kumo D. Now, what's interesting about his bio, there's conflicting information that I've had because I know for a lot of sites he has a BA degree.
Mhm.
And well, some sites say B degree. I remember him just saying that he has a degree from Toledo College and from Manhattan. So there's a lot of discrepancy about that. But he's really big on lyrics. And I remember his philosophy was if you have to use a word twice, go and find another word. But his communications degree kind of dictated that in the kind of way. So I could see how that fits. And the lyrics as an architect in effect in its lands, if it's weak when I'm done, renovate and build another one, I go to work. I'm sorry, I had to say it
I
exactly just the
know.
way he did, which I thought was really cool that particular time. Do you have any memories yourself, Kirsten?
So I know this song. I was a little bit younger when it came out, but
More.
the part that resonates with me today is, and if it's weak when I'm done, renovate and build another one. Like, yes, if it's weak when I'm done,
Yep.
renovate and build another one. Like
Yeah.
that's speaking to me. That's saying to me, you know what? You did, you followed your plan. It didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. But guess what? You know how now. Now you can go and make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think of the lyric about being an architect resonates with me. When I was in high school, back at that time when they had other things that was just other than preparing for state tests, we were able to take drafting. Now, drafting is kind of like in a sense, what you may relate to a pharmacy tech is a drafter kind of prepares the basic of the floor plans, and then the architect goes in and makes all these different changes, or he may add a whole lot more detail. So you think about architect, it adds a lot more detail. And it's not always great to make a plan so detailed, but for a lot of people, that really works
Mm,
for them. So I think people need to do what works for them, but yeah, you do have to kind of make a structure and know the foundation that's going to be built on to be effective. And I think that really
right.
makes an effective career plan.
Yes.
So, for all of you who are thinking about going into architecture, which I don't think that, might be a few people who have thought about it in the past, you might want to think about how firm that foundation is going to be in the way that you laid. So, because if you're going to renovate, you still have to have a firm foundation for sure. But the other thing I thought was pretty interesting when I was looking and checking to see what Kumo D has been doing in the past few years or the past few decades, it's depending how you look at it.
Yeah.
Did you know that he had a song with Pat Boone?
I did not.
Yes, it's called Backbone.
Did he rap
Eh,
on it or did
Yes,
uh
Kumo D rapped on it.
yeah.
Pat Boone is a good singer.
Okay.
And mind you, there's a whole lot of things that I'm not going to go down the road there with him that I never really liked Pat Boone for some political reasons, but not political in the way that you think it is, but musically political. But it's very interesting that he would collaborate with them. I mean, you know, they're from two different generations. In fact, you might want to argue that Pat Boone's like four generations removed from, today's kids. So they're going, who's Pat Boone? Go look it up. Go on YouTube, find the song Backbone. It will bring joy to your heart, I promise, in a way that
Okay.
you thought you never did before. So let's go to the next one. And again, feel free if you're all in the chat or listening, or somebody's listening, feel free to put your comment in. Let us know what are some lyrics that were kind of career related to you that really resonates with you. Maybe it motivated you to do what you're doing today. So the other one is a job ain't nothing but work. And I think everybody kind of relate to that at one point or another. Have you had some jobs in the past that you can just say that was just to get me by a
Yes.
period of time?
I advocate for them, especially for people who have been on the job market and maybe, feeling discouraged, like, what's it worth? What am I doing wrong? Because it does take time. Even if you're in an optimal setting, the average time you're going to be on the job market is 90 days. Like that's how long it takes to find a new job. So I tell people that there are a few things: your current job, your now job, your dream job, that one you're waiting on, and what I call the in between job. And there is nothing wrong with an in between job. Surprisingly, sometimes those things turn into our dream jobs because we're able to add, our own flavor, our own seasonings. We're able to do and stretch ourselves in ways that, the job didn't call for. And that those lead to other things. I always like to tell folks things from personal experience because sometimes me just saying this as someone who's like, the holder of the jobs, I'm kind of looked at as, well, what do you know about looking for a job? I like to show people, the things that I've been through. And there was a period of time that I was unemployed, meaning I was not doing a lot of consulting work and I did not have a corporate job in recruiting. And I did, like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I worked at a church part-time, doing the Sunday bulletin, doing light secretarial work, using my spreadsheet skills to get their membership rolls in order and all that stuff. And, making, digital media for them. And that's how I really learned how to do Canva. And,
Yeah.
I was able to translate that into my business. And I became a lot more confident in my abilities to create my own marketing materials and things like that. So, like sometimes those in between jobs, they bring out skills that are dormant or skills that you didn't even know you had. So yeah, go for it. Because sometimes a job ain't nothing but a work, but your career is a different story.
Right. And I think, yeah, I think everybody can learn from the little jobs that they had. Thank you very much for joining me on the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark, and welcome. By the way, this coming January will make 10 years in doing this podcast. Actually, September of 2023, but I'm going to start claiming it in January. That'll be the 10th year that I've been doing this podcast. Used to call it the TVOJS. And I'm probably going to start using that acronym once again. But welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. We know that everybody has a challenge with job search, no matter whether you're an old pro, whether you are someone new coming out of college. Everyone finds this task daunting. But those who stay plugged into the job search are the ones who win the day. I hope that I can continue that kind of engagement with you. And I hope that you'll be able to capture that as part of your mantra going into this year and going forward. Let me give you a rundown of the show, and doing it a little bit differently this year than any other year. This year I have a co-host, and she's a guest co-host. Okay, granted, but Keirsten Greggs is a friend of mine. She is also known as a trap recruiter. She's going to be the guest host, which means you're going to hear her for a good part of the fall season anyway. She's an experienced talent acquisition leader and career coach. We discuss some fun topics and we try to make it a little intriguing. For this show and this episode, Norma Davila is a resume writer and career management expert. She shares a job search trend that she sees and sees solutions for, and that tries to help her clients with those. And Alexandra Levit is a workplace futurist and a Wall Street Journal columnist, and I include a link to that article, as well as everybody's profiles that I mentioned. So I hope you enjoy the show. And if you have any questions, feel free to engage us here. You can always give me a call at 708-365-9822. You can send me a text or leave me a message. You can also send me an email at mark@thevoiceofjobseekers.com. And at worst, you can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com, press the speak pipe button. That's probably the easiest, and you can just leave a verbal message there. In the meantime, enjoy the show. We're just going to be here for a few minutes, talking about job search trends, and Norma Davila, PhD. That's the only one I'll use because she has so many letters. I think I'm in school. But I want to welcome Norma. She is a career coach and a career expert. She's been involved in books. She's done lots of press. She's meant a lot of contributions in the career world, the career space. Welcome to the show, Norma. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good. And you're coming to us from Puerto Rico, correct?
That's right.
That's right. One of these days, I'm going to be able to pronounce it correctly. It's really Puerto as opposed to Porto. But, me and my New York, Chicago, Florida, Michigan accent, we get all those things jumbled up and it comes out wrong every time. So
It's okay.
excuse me for that. But again, this is the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. And just going to talk a few minutes with Norma about job search trends that she's seeing and she's seeing with their clients, and she's been to a few conferences, and we got a chance to meet at one of those conferences in Philadelphia recently. So we got a chance to talk a little bit. So really, Norma, you're looking at some things that are going on in the career space globally as well as with your clients. Uh,
That's right.
what's one or two things that you've been seeing recently that you've been kind of helping your clients navigate through this space?
Sure. I'm glad that you're pointing out the fact that it's locally as well as globally, because I do have clients in Puerto Rico and stateside for the most part. So it's an interesting combination of groups that I happen to be serving. However, I'm seeing very similar trends in terms of the aging population wanting to stay in the workforce. And by aging, I mean anybody over 50. I myself
Mhm.
am part of that group. For some
Well,
reason,
I am too. So, old fan club.
one of the things that we have in common, among others. And for some reason, I'm finding that people around that age group gravitate towards my coaching services. And I've found that many of them either want to stay, change in the workforce, doing what they've been doing, or doing something else, but they don't have a clue of how to approach it. And that's where people like me come in.
Gotcha. So really, yeah, aging is a big concern for the most part because a lot of them had to get out of the workforce
That's right.
and then realizing what the economy and inflation begin to do, they want to get back in.
Yes. But they may not want to be doing the same thing. They may not know what else they can do. They may not feel comfortable accepting those challenges they have, or they haven't even thought about them. So some of them come to me telling me things like, I've never interviewed in my life. I always got selected. I got called for. How do I approach this thing that I've heard it's changed, but I don't quite know how to approach it? Which, in a way, are the same concerns that somebody just joining the workforce may be facing, only that a lot of my clients think that age is going to be a bigger deal against them than it can actually be.
Yeah, it's hard to tell whether they are or not, but for the most part, when companies have talent issues and they're unable to get the talent that are available in the market that they would like to get, some of them are not turning back to and saying, come back to the workforce, to the older ones. They're very hesitant to. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, it's a matter of how we position ourselves in the market. And I think that also the networking, the connections, the letting people know us as we are. This is what I've got. I'm not going to pretend to be 20. I'm not 20 anymore. I don't want to be 20 anymore. But this is the experience that I bring from working however many years in whatever area. And this is what I can bring to your business to solve those pain points. Once I get my clients to go beyond, I'm not competing with the 20-year-olds, I'm with the 50-year-olds, and I have a lot of experience that can be valuable. And if that's not it for that company, then move on. They're more comfortable with the whole process, and their interviews flow a lot better. So they're more likely to get those opportunities and to get those offers. And I think
So,
also
how are
it's
you?
important. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I ask you, how are you preparing them for that type of success, and what are you doing particularly to help help changing their perception and their positioning? for them to get out there and be a little bit more successful this time?
It's a great question because that's the biggest challenge that I have with them, and I have to tailor my approach individually. Since the first step is, okay, let's get at what do you know, who you are, what you want to do. Forget about requirements, forget about what's out there. Let's focus on you. And that takes them to have a deeper look at everything they've done. Let's focus on the positives. Let's focus on what you have. Oh, but I don't know. We're not going to be going there. If there's
Yeah, they
any,
want, and many times they want to broaden their spectrum, so they think,
yeah,
well, I'll take anything. You go, no, 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 don't
no,
do that,
don't.
please.
No, please, let's stay within what you know and what you can do. And if we need to transfer skills, we'll work on those. But also something else that you've just mentioned or hinted at rather is some of them approach me like, "Oh, but I didn't finish this degree. I'm going to go for that certification or that whatever." So one of my recommendations is always take it slowly. Going to school, dumping a lot of money into an experience is not necessarily going to mean your key to success. And if you're going to go for certifications, make sure that those are recognizable and transferable in different markets because you don't know where you're going to end up, either working in person or remotely, like I work for the most part.
Yeah, I like the idea of hacking knowledge, essentially, because what these programs, whether you're talking about college and whether you get
Mhm.
a master's, or even some certification programs are quite expensive.
Yes.
There are things that you could do to hack that process. And we have a lot of those things at our fingertips, right? We have YouTube,
Mhm.
we have Udemy, LinkedIn Learning offer a lot of those courses. If you can show the acumen and if you're adept at different types of learning, you can actually make yourself and position yourself in such a way that you don't need that, but these skills that I have now, and plus what I've learned just recently, will translate to what the employer will need.
Yeah, and it's not only paid employment because a lot of my clients have done a lot of volunteer work, board work, all kinds of non-paid experiences that still help them to develop those skills needed in the workforce. So it's openness, is knowing themselves, is knowing how far I'm willing to go to get this, and then getting into the mind frame of going for it, meeting people, and showing that because I'm wearing glasses and I'm over 50 doesn't mean that I'm dated and I'm willing to learn,
Absolutely.
just like you're saying.
Absolutely. And of course, they can follow you on LinkedIn to find out more information as you begin, because you kind of post regularly, at least 2 or 3 times a week, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes, yes,
and that they can follow you or they can even approach you to ask you questions or even get to your services, correct?
absolutely. And I'll be glad to answer questions and brainstorm and even share stories either of my clients or of my own reinventions over
Right,
time
right.
together.
And those stories are quite helpful too, because I think a lot of people tend to do that. And I like it when people are even more focused with their stories and saying that there's actually a point to me telling you why I do this and do that. And that's really much more helpful. But is there anything coming up that you should know, or that people should know about you and, what you've got coming up?
Well, one of the things that are coming up is that I'll be posting more frequently, and that is a way to get more information on interviewing and coaching, on resumes, and those basic tools that are not the only thing people are going to be needing to do their job search. Also, my business partner and I got published in the Association for Talent Development's handbook. We have a chapter on
Okay.
onboarding. So that was just
Awesome.
launched last week, and we're excited about it.
Excellent. Excellent. I know it's an exciting time too, isn't it?
Yeah,
And people can also see some of the photos that you were able to post on attending the conference as well. Annette
that's right.
Richmond, my good friend is Annette Richmond. Thank you for commenting. She says, "I know so many successful people without a degree." That's true. And I was just talking to a colleague of ours. I won't mention his name because she hasn't made public knowledge, but she
Mhm,
was telling me that how her son came right out of high school
mhm.
and is on the verge of capturing a job for $23 an hour without a degree, just graduating. Now, of course, there's some thinking that needs to be behind that, but it was pretty much premeditated. He knew exactly what he wanted and how he wanted to
Yeah.
position himself, and even down to the letter of them talking about, interviewing. But I think that's how people should really get down to the very deep root of what they want, is to think about in detail how they need to look at it and how they need to position themselves and how they need to appear in front of employers.
Exactly. And at the beginning of our conversation this morning, you mentioned the long list of letters after my last name. And I must point out, no, I see it as a positive part of what the workforce is undergoing right now, because
Mhm.
in my generation and that of many of my clients, if you didn't have X, Y, or Z degree, you didn't qualify for whatever. It may look like you're overqualified if you have different degrees. So it's how you use those credentials depending on what's required and what you need to be doing to come across as an expert in your area, regardless of the degree. The degree may open the door, but you may not have a clue of your field still. So what
Right.
do you do
Well,
after that?
right. I know. Well, Norma, thank you very much for joining me here on the podcast and the live stream. I hope things will continue to go well with you. We'll be in touch, and hopefully people will follow you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. Even though this is a live stream, just to draw a distinction between a podcast and a live stream, this is eventually going to end up on the podcast, but I want to present it to you guys live so that you can get this information and get this content right away. And hopefully you'll be able to find useful and helpful hints to inform your particular job search and career goals. And we're talking about the four truths of 2020's workforce we should embrace. This is Alex Levit. Those of you who don't know her, a lot of my colleagues do know her from the different conferences and different articles that we all end up reading. And if you don't know her by her Wall Street Journal uh, uh, gig, then you probably have known her throughout her books. And she's a workforce futurist and also a columnist, like I said, for Wall Street Journal, CEO at Inspirational Work, international bestseller of Humanity Works, which I do have a copy and been reading throughout time. And just want to welcome you actually back to the show.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for having me back. I think the first time that I came on the Voice of Job Seekers was 10, 12 years ago, perhaps. Could that be right?
That maybe not that long ago, but it sure seems like that long ago,
Okay.
actually. And you were a multiple time guest. You just weren't, we just weren't
Mhm.
hanging out for onesies. I think you were on at least four times. And if I'm not mistaken, Alex, I was the first podcast you were on. Is that correct?
That's probably true because you definitely started podcasting earlier than most. You had your finger on the pulse of that trend very, very early on. So
Yeah.
that's absolutely possible.
Yeah. Although I was kind of late to the party, but in our industry, I think there were very few. There was Chris Russell's Career Cloud. And then I'm also reminded of Jet Altman's show that he's been doing this since 2010, longer than I have, I think, 2009, maybe even earlier. But he has something like 2,300 shows.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Wow. But
Definitely.
anyway, shout out to Jeff, shout out to Chris Russell, to
Good
both of
job,
them.
Chris.
And just want to talk with you for a few minutes about your article that you had on the
Mhm.
workforceinstitute.org. And I should put that in the link somewhere so that people can get a hold of it. But we're talking about, again, your article, Four Truths of 2020's Workforce We Should Embrace. And I think that's very important because there is a major shift in the way that we think about work and the way we're looking at work from this point on. We're not even talking about how a lot of people still need to catch up from, when you were writing about it back in 2012,
Mhm.
2013. We're talking about now, we do see a lot of those things come to fruition.
Isn't it fun when you see
Yeah,
the thing come to
it's
fruition?
wonderful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my friend Jack Kelly, who also writes for Forbes and is one of my co-hosts in one of the shows that we've done throughout the past couple of years, he's very also has his finger on the pulse and actually some of which he adapts not directly from your writing, but from his perspective as a business owner in compliance and has done recruiting for many years. I mention him because he also has his finger very much on it. And I think one of the points that you came up with was the number one, and just going by the article, and I think all this is that machines are our partners and that we need to be really, when it comes down to it, we need to be adapting to what the technology is not and it's kind of a two-way street. Technology adapting to us as we adapt to technology. Is that the right way to frame it here?
I think that's a perfect way to frame it. And the thing that I try to emphasize to everyone is that automation is not one of those things where it's set and forget, where you say, all right, I'm going to lay off a percentage of my workforce because I'm going to replace them with automation. And then you put the automation in and you don't need any people to be involved in the process. And that's really a very strong misconception. In fact,
Mhm.
whenever you insert a machine into a traditionally human driven process, you still need a person to design the machine, to oversee the machine's activities, to fix the machine when it's not working as intended, and to figure out if it's not working as intended, how can we redeploy it? You also need people who are in a category that I call the explainers. And these people exist for the express purpose of taking the data that the machine comes up with and explaining it to decision makers so decision makers feel comfortable making widespread forecasts, making decisions about their business based on the data and the insights that are coming out. So that's actually a lot of people that have to be involved with the oversight of machines. And of course, there's the ethical question too, where we have to make sure that the decisions that the machine is making are not just things that are in the best interest of the bottom line, but are in the best interest of us from a reputational and ethical standpoint. Because machines don't have a conscience. They're just doing what they're programmed to do. But sometimes that has that backfires in kind of an unintended way. If you're not looking, if you're you don't have your eyes on the road, then you could very likely miss that the machine is doing things that may not long term be in the best interests of your organization.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, though, that you know, as you were talking about it through your book, I think it was 2018 or 19 when it came out, and you and I did a subsequent article on Flex Jobs afterwards. One thing I think that people thought that AI was just going to come and elbow and bully everybody out and say,
Right.
"Here I am,"
Mhm.
and that definitely hasn't been the case. In fact, if any company
Yeah.
had thought that's how it was going to go down, they were sadly mistaken because what we find out is, no, we really need people.
Right. And that's for the reasons that we just talked about, right? It's
Right.
because you can't just set and forget AI either. And I think people have this notion that AI is going to be this all powerful, smarter than human beings, has every capability in a greater degree than human beings. And in fact, there are certain things that humans are better at and certain things that AI is better at. And that's why I say that they make the best partners because really they can complement each other in some pretty cool ways if you know how to deploy a team that is what I call a human machine hybrid team, where it encompasses both people and aspects of technology that are artificially intelligent driven.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for anybody that's watching, say hi to us. Let us know that you're
Yeah.
out there watching.
Thanks for
uh,
coming today.
I don't know exactly who's
Mhm,
watching just
mhm,
yet, but I hope that people are going to take notes later on.
mhm.
Machines are our friends, is what we're ultimately saying. Machines are not there to try to steal anything. And in fact, for those who may need to have a longer range look on how maybe they can be part of the revolution by enhancing the use of the machine, is going to be helpful also to their careers.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that's one of the most important things that people can learn when it comes to upskilling and an area that both you and I talk a lot about is
Mhm.
how you can keep yourself marketable, how you can keep your skills fresh. And one of the skills that's so important is what I call applied technology skills. So, what applied technology skills mean, and I know we've talked about it on the show in the past,
Hmm.
it's leveraging people, processes, data, and devices to do your job more effectively. So, as an example, it's not necessarily that you know how to build a website from scratch or build an app from scratch, but you know that the technology exists to build an app and that you can use that technology to do it in a quicker way, in a simpler way. And those applied technology skills are something that pretty much regardless of your role, regardless of your level, your tenure, what you do for a living, your profession, you're going to need those because technology has infiltrated every profession to some degree. If you're a lawyer, for example, you need to know that you don't have to go to manual records and look up cases, that you can do so using software that will look up case histories from in a very, very rapid manner. And if
Hmm.
you don't know that that technology exists, you are going to be left behind because people are going to be able to do that case research much faster than you'll be able to do it. And so that's why these applied technology skills are essential. And how do you get them? Well, it's just a matter of asking people, reading in your field, learning how are other people doing it, attending conferences, learning about new technologies, and having a lot of conversations and brainstorms about how you can bring this new technology to your profession to, again, do your job more effectively and efficiently.
Hmm. Yeah, yes, which kind of merges into your second point in the article. It talks about we restructure agile workforces, and I think one of the main points is that how mobile is really become sort of the catalyst on how we can realign our work and really get a great vision of what that looks like, at least as far as our lifestyle. Because I've been talking about in recent years of how job search is a lifestyle, and I'm not just talking about constantly looking for a job. I'm just talking about the constant access that we have within our grips. When we're on vacation, we need something to read. We can get our mobile and kind of still plug into things that are relevant in our career without feeling the effects of having to feel like it's work.
Yeah. And the smartphone was obviously extremely influential in this development. And things like Zoom video conferencing technology, like we're using right now, this is technology that's been available for a couple of decades. It didn't really reach critical mass until the pandemic mandated it. And I think one of the bigger mistakes that we can make as a society is saying, oh, well, we're kind of done with COVID-19. So let's try to go back to the way things were. Let's have everybody in an office full time, and
Yeah.
we are mandating that they do X, Y, and Z, when in fact, this is something that we were talking about well before the pandemic. The technology exists to make it possible. People prefer, by and large, this type of flex environment where sometimes you can be in a conference room with other individuals face to face. Sometimes you can be working asynchronously at home. It's a method that just works with today's lifestyle. And the fact is, the COVID-19 pandemic is absolutely not the last disruption we are going to see.
Okay.
Could there be another pandemic? Absolutely. Could there be adverse climate events where you physically can't go into an office again because there's been a flood, there's been a blackout? These things, unfortunately, I hate to break it to everyone, are going to be happening more and more throughout the 2020s, throughout the 2030s. And so being able to work in this way is really, really important. And more crucially, as an organization, allowing your people to work this way and to make this a permanent part of how your organization is structured is so important because we cannot go backward. If we do go backward, we're just going to find ourselves having to rebuild again with the next disruption, a hybrid workforce. And I really don't see the point of that.
And what's interesting, and to your point, I just thought about how, and I learned while my son was in the Air Force,
Mhm.
there were a couple of times when he was based in Charleston, South Carolina, they had to evacuate the whole city when there was a hurricane warning, or that in one case there was an actual hurricane that actually came through, wasn't as destructive to that city as they were to others. But all that to say that they were able to get thousands of people to evacuate, but they also get thousands of people to come back at the same time with very few hitches. And all that to say is that a lot of it is just communication, and communication that they had accessible right away. And I think in terms of what people have to understand from companies, they want that kind of flexibility and agility to where you can leave and you can come back without as many hitches. I think there's a fight in different pockets of where companies where they have different. Some companies have an unrealistic expectation of people just always being plugged in and into one stationary place. And there's a section of the workforce that's also saying that I'd rather be plugged in into one particular place. That just not only applies to just where you physically are, but how you are in your career and what you'll need to toggle, because every toggle or every switch that you do is not going to look the same ever, the same way it has in the past.
That's right. And this customization of careers is something that you and I have been talking about for years. And it
Mhm.
applies more than ever now because people have a lot of choices with respect to not just what they do, but how they do it.
Yeah.
And so to be flexible as an organization and be willing to say, we like this person, we think they have this core skill set, we think they have potential. Could they do their work in a different way than they have in the past? And by the way, this doesn't just apply to professionals. This
Right.
applies to everybody, and that's something I get a lot of pushback on. Oh, well,
Mhm.
we're a retail organization. We need people to actually be there. Yes, this is true. You do need people to be there. But how they're there, when they're there, you can be a little bit more creative about it. You can allow people to schedule their own shifts. You can allow them to switch shifts with somebody else. The technology more than exists
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
facilitate this kind of system. So I don't like it when certain organizations say, we're an in person organization, we have essential workers, we can't offer flexibility, because that's simply not true.
Yes, which merges into your next point about emphasizing creativity, which
Mhm.
really on both ends really needs to take place. Employers need to visualize their employees having and be willing to be more flexible, because it does add to their livelihood, and employees are wanting a job where it will merge. It doesn't necessarily have to all collide or have
Right.
to go together perfectly, but they do want to, kind of merge their ideas and their livelihood together in such a way that it doesn't always have to feel like work because I'm being stalked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if that sounds clear, that's where people are really looking to find those kind of jobs. Or maybe if they want to make it separate, that's fine. But it doesn't have to disrupt completely their lives, because again, they may have to move like the military does. If there's a hurricane, everybody's going to need to ship some way physically. So that means either whether they take care of their work, take the work with them, or that they're going to have to adapt to uh, whatever it takes to get the work done in a necessary manner.
Yeah, I would like to see creativity take a major role, especially when it comes to skills. I'm working on a new book that's coming out this winter with a
Ah,
company called Eightfold, and Eightfold has software that allows us to determine if somebody has skill A, might they also have skill B? And it's a way of helping organizations and individuals to see how careers can be nonlinear, and how if you have one skill set, you could quite easily be trained into a different skill set, so that when you're an organization, if you find that a certain area of your business is experiencing a downturn, instead of laying off those people, you have the intelligence, and we call it talent intelligence, behind you to say, we don't have to lay these people off. We can retrain them in this area and they can be just as successful doing a job that's necessary to the organization right now. But this does require a little bit of a leap of faith. It requires some creativity. And I think it's also really beneficial for organizations not just to do it for their own benefit, but because it can benefit society at large when you help greater numbers of people be employed for more sustained periods of time. And at the end of the day, we talked about this research years ago. People
mhm.
don't want to be jumping around a lot. They would prefer to have stable employment, the majority of people. And I think that's a misconception with the great resignation, that everybody wants to be moving around and disrupting their lives and their careers. People would rather, if they like an organization and feel like the organization has their back, they'd rather stick with that organization. And so if you can use talent intelligence and say, all right, well, here's your skill set. Here are the multitude of things that you can do with that skill set. to help our business in different ways. I think it's something that, again, the technology is there. Are we using it? Has it taken taken up mass residence in the job seeking and workforce world? No, but I think this is definitely where it's going.
Yeah. And I think people are moving only because they're not getting the satisfaction from the employer, and employers stuck in their heels. And it seems like a lot of leaders and leaders of organizations, they are more apt to still there's this pushback to getting some things back the way they used to be, as opposed to imagining how everything can really be synced together, which may include some movement in the workforce, but there are still a lot of people who want the stability. I know a lot of older people are still wanting somewhere where they can ride into the sunset with, so to speak. And that's not a bad thing, but how realistic it is where we don't see an employer kind of meeting people halfway with it kind of giving them the vision that, hey, technology in your life can work together, and we all can work
Mhm.
together. It may need a little patience, but it can do so. And that's why your fourth point about being conscious about technology use, I think that's a big pushback on both sides where
Mhm.
they really don't agree, is where people are saying, well, we want our space and being able to do it. And they said, well, you can only have your space, but not from 9 to 5.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's gonna be a continual push and pull, and
Yeah.
it brings us back full circle to machines are our friends, machines are our partners. We don't necessarily need to use that as a justification to work so much more or so much less. I think at the end of the day, really, machines provide us with an opportunity to do work that's more strategic and more meaningful to us, as opposed to spending a lot of time doing administrative tasks, doing manual tasks that really are that's the type of work that tends to some people like it, but a lot of people feel bored, they feel uninspired. And so let's let machines take over what they're good at, which is repetitive work with large data sets to kind of distill out the key insights. And then once we have those insights, we can use our creative human brains to really make the most of them.
Absolutely. So, all in all, in this, if you were to summarize with the way that people need, particularly job seekers, we know we love employers. I understand you work with them quite a bit, but what's the one takeaway that job seekers need to understand in going into 2023, 2024, and what their expectations employers should be when it comes to using technology in their lives and how they can merge it and make into one?
I would like to communicate to job seekers that the secret to gainful employment in the 2020s is what we call career durability. And that means that you have the attitude and the skills to remain gainfully employed despite what disruptions might occur in the external world. And there are 5 pillars of career durability. It's having the right mix of hard skills, soft skills, applied technology skills, which we talked about, a growth
Mhm.
mindset, and institutional knowledge, or having been in an industry or in a profession long enough to genuinely know how things work. And if you focus on these 5 pillars and you're continually looking for ways to expand your skill set and become as broad as possible in terms of your transferable skills, which are skills that are relevant across a wide variety of industries and roles, things like project management, marketing, sales, applied technology. If you really zero in on those things, then you will have career durability. And I think you'll find that no matter what happens, you're able to pivot or transition into a different type of role.
Yes. Well, I feel an article coming on. No tell, we'll have to talk later. But
Okay.
but I think it's really important that people understand that very last part about the transferable skills and what it really means. I mean, there are plenty of areas where people can actually jump. And we talked about before we got on that, college education necessarily isn't necessarily going to be the thing to help you make the jumps. There are
Mhm.
plenty of certificates. There's plenty of even YouTubes if you really want to hack it In fact, if you can hack it, in some cases, that's even better than getting the certificate and probably a lot less cheaper. So
Faster.
all in all, yeah, and faster. But I think people need to stop looking and say, this is where I'm going to park all the time. You got to look at where all the other parking spaces are for your career in the future. Alex, I know you have to go. And thank you very much for coming on the show. And if people want to get a hold of you, how should they? Should they go ahead to alexandralevit.com?
Yeah, ALEXANDRALEVIT.com. You can email me there. I'd love to hear from you. I'm also on Twitter at Alevit, ALEVIT, or LinkedIn. I'm on there as well. I love to dialogue with people. That's how I get the material for my books and my columns, is by learning what are the hot button issues that people are facing today and how can I help to the best of my ability. So
Yeah.
thank you.
In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Peace in the Valley of Love.